Sometimes I'm asked by people to help them become more assertive. And I really don't like the idea of assertiveness, because assertiveness has become something that we associate with aggression and dominance. And aggression and dominance really plays to the ego. The ego loves the idea of being able to assert power over someone, and because that leads to control, and what is the ego all about? It's about control. The problem with that is, if we are asserting power over someone through force, because assertiveness is really force, we're breaking trust, because what it's demonstrating is that you're more invested in what you want than what the other person wants. And so it leaves them with the feeling that you don't care about them and what they need, and that breaks trust. But not only does it break trust, it creates resistance. So we know from science that if you exert a force, you're going to be faced with an equal and opposite force. And so when you're forcing something, you are creating resistance. So a lot of your energy is being expended in fighting against the resistance, the opposite force. So it's not energy efficient, number one. Number two, it breaks trust. And when trust breaks down, you eventually get to the point where people go, I've had enough. You see this with dictatorial leaders. Well, it's a bit of an oxymoron, that, dictatorial leaders, but you know what I mean. Dictators. People have enough of them, and they either leave the relationship, leave the business, leave the team, or in countries, sometimes there's an uprising where they take their revenge on those leaders. And so it's very short-term focused, and it's not healthy. Now, I was doing a training the other day with a team, and one of the guys was getting feedback from his team, and they said to him that he's very assertive, and he sometimes, because of that, intimidates people. And there was a little flicker of a smile across his face, which is what we call a micro expression, which is very, very difficult to consciously override. And if you're watching and observing closely with people and you see that, it gives you an indication of their response to what's going on. And so he quickly caught himself, of course. It wasn't meant as a compliment, but he took it as a compliment. And I think that's because the ego loves to be in control, and the idea of having power and control over someone excites the ego. So we need to step out of this, because this is not a good strategy. And we want to focus on two things. The first is boundaries. Every single person has the right to set and defend their boundaries, and you get to decide what those boundaries are, no one else. But we don't have to defend the boundary with aggression. In fact, if you're using aggression to defend your boundaries, it's usually an indication that you lack confidence in your ability to stand your ground and defend those boundaries, or that your boundaries are weak and you know it, and that you know that you've got to come out guns a-blazing to try and intimidate the person back away from your boundaries, because if they keep coming at you, you know that you're going to crumble, so you don't have strong boundaries. So if you're needing to use aggression to defend your boundaries, then the problem is not the boundary. The problem is your ability or your confidence to hold that boundary. And when we set boundaries firmly, there should be no need to get worked up about it. There's the boundary. Yeah, that's what I'm prepared to put up with, and that's what I'm not prepared to put up with. That's how I'm prepared for you to deal and interact with me, and that is how I'm not prepared. I'm not going to tolerate that. Okay, whatever those boundaries are. So that's the one thing. So instead of assertiveness, it's actually firmness. It's being firm in setting and holding your boundaries. The second thing is influence. Assertiveness versus influence. And influence is getting somebody to willingly cooperate. And here's the difference. You see, when you assert yourself over somebody and you're using force, because that's what assertiveness is, you give the person the feeling that you only care about what you want and what you need and not what they want. When you use influence, it leaves a person with a completely different feeling. And that feeling is that you actually care about what I want. And so it's the feeling of win-win. It's the feeling that you've got my back. And because I feel that you've got my back, when I feel that you've got my back, then I'm going to trust you. So influence builds trust. And the acid test of influence is if you had no power over someone, because sometimes sometimes you may be in a position where you have some sort of power over somebody, positional power, or it might be you're older than someone, or you have more status, or whatever that power, perceived power might be. If you're in a position where you have some sort of power over someone and you use that power to get what you want, that's not leadership. That's not influence. That's dictatorship and force. That's assertiveness. And so here's the question. If you had no power over somebody, would they still cooperate with you? If you had no power over somebody, would they still follow you in the context of leading? And that's a sobering thought, because when you take out of the equation any power, how would you approach that person? How would you deal with that person? How would you deal with that situation differently? See, it's so tempting to go to the power, because that's the quick win. I can get in there, I can muscle my way in, I can force you to do it, and I'll get my way, I get the result. But it's short term, it creates resistance, and it breaks trust. But if you ask yourself, hold on, if I'm in this for the long term, and I cannot use any power, how would I deal with this situation? How would I deal with this person? So that they willingly want to cooperate with me. And that's a great way to start thinking about the way you interact with people. And it's through that thought process, it's through that approach that you will start to build your influence. Because as long as you're using power and assertiveness and forcefulness, what you're not doing is you're not growing in the area of influence. You're not building your skill and your ability to influence people positively, to get the cooperation willingly. So you've got to ask yourself, what's more important for you? Short-term win, break trust, waste energy, and force people? Or is yours more of a long-term focus? Build trust, build relationships, build willingness, build cooperation. And that's a choice that you can make. It's harder, but the positive way is often harder, because it requires us to grow. And using your power, see, you didn't have to grow to get your power. If you have power, you got it. And you just you have the choice whether you use it or whether you choose to build your influence.